In today's episode, we're going to be talking about boosting your current income, melding your career with what you actually want to do, and the ultimate goal of transitioning into location independent or starting your own business. My guest today is Scott Barlow, who helps people figure out what they want to do with work and helps them transition that whole thing with his business happen to your career. So first off, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell me, how did you get involved with this? What was the transition from happened in your life that
Oh,
you
geez.
did this?
Yeah. So, really it started for me when I was going through college, and not to reach too far back, but I went to school. I had no idea what it was that I wanted to do. I really didn't. I mean, I was one of those people where I'm like, okay, that sounds great. And I'd change majors, and, 7 or 8 major changes later, I still really had no idea what it was that I should be doing. And, colleges unfortunately aren't that great at helping you along with that too.
Hmm.
You sort of just get stuck on a path, and it may or may not be really actually that good for you. So I eventually, I started out in literally studio recording. That's what I was doing. I thought I was going to be in a band and it was going to be awesome, right?
Hmm.
And slowly it got into computer science. Decided I didn't want to write code in a closet forever, and eventually found my way over to business. And that was the first thing I really found that I could sort of sink my teeth into a little bit. And when I found that, I realized, okay, the place where I was going to school, Eastern Washington University, you had to have an internship. And I was looking around at all of my friends and my peers, other students, other people that I went to school with, people in my fraternity house, and they're all getting these crappy internships. Like, I go get donuts for this person, and I work on these crappy projects, and it was terrible. So I'm looking at that going, really, I'm going to spend 2 quarters doing that? That sounds awful. And I didn't want to do that, obviously. So I started looking for, how can I get something that actually gives me experience, something that's actually enjoyable, something that's going to actually get me ahead, if you want to call it that.
Hmm.
And be careful what you wish for, because I ended up coming home with a small business. So it was, it was not that sexy of a business, to be honest with you. I did painting, and
Okay.
I employed a whole bunch of my friends, and at the height of it, I had like 25 people that were painting for me,
Oh.
and I got to go snowboarding during the winters and then work during the summers, and it worked out really well. But the real key out of that was it exposed me to so many different things. And then I ended up getting married right out of college, and that was awesome. My wife and I are still married, really, really happy. But I thought for some reason that once you graduate school, you have to just like go get a real job,
Hmm.
which I don't know why I thought that necessarily.
I think everybody thinks that, but yeah.
Yeah, so I was one of those people, and so I sold off all the stuff to the business. Even though as a college student, I'm making 40 grand a year at the end of it, part time, part of the year. And it's like, hey, that's pretty good, but I had to go get a real job. So I went and got a real job. I took the first thing that really came across my radar, and I knew from the beginning I wasn't going to like it. And 1 year later, after having a couple of panic attacks and anxiety attacks, driving, through Portland traffic on the way to this job that I absolutely loathed, and, staying up really late on Sunday nights trying to convince myself that if I watched enough TV, the next Monday morning wouldn't come somehow. I finally got the courage enough to tell my boss that I wasn't enjoying it. And apparently he felt the same way, because 3 weeks later he fired me. So that's what started me down this path. I was really forced to figure out after that, because I had a mortgage, and I had my dream cars and all this other stuff. I was really forced to figure out, how do I not do this over again? Because that's, a couple of days after that, I really resolved to not not ever again do work that didn't fit me or that I really didn't enjoy. So that was the beginning of that quest. And then I ended up making a couple of different career changes, and people started hearing about that, and they're like, "Hey, I've got this friend. Would you go have coffee with him? He's an accountant and he hates his job, and he'd really love to be doing this thing." So I'd
Mm-hmm.
go and I'd have coffee with people, and lo and behold, started helping them. They started sending me thank yous and gift cards and things like that. And it's like, oh, hey, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
So that's where it all started. And then a few years after that, when I was looking to go back into my own business, my wife and I started thinking about Happen to Your Career.
So on this podcast, I have a lot of episodes where I talk about people just quitting their job, starting something, freelancing, etc.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not always the right way to do it. Sometimes the right way to do it is grow your current income, maybe then eventually switch over to the next thing. So let's talk a little bit about people that are in a job and they're not necessarily unhappy, but they want to boost their current income. Do you have any tips on how to do that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And there's two ways you can go, really. You can raise your income for the thing that you're already doing. So I was an HR manager. We work with all different professions. We work with lots of, I have two emails in my inbox right now from I think a 25 and a 27-year-old. One of them is, what is it? Oh, he's an engineer. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember what the other one does. Either way, if you're in that situation, really, you don't necessarily have to go and do something extra to be able to raise your income. One way you can do that is you could actually work with your boss, work with your company to be able to figure out how they can pay you more. And I know that sounds a little bit out of the ordinary, but I've done that multiple times in my life and helped quite a few different people do that exact same thing. So what I'm really talking about is being able to ask for a raise and actually get it. And really, this kind of relates back to that ultimate goal. And we really teach people to figure out what it is that you want in your life. And then once you understand that really, really well, then how do you actually get that? So this whole making more money part of it, if that allows you to do some of the things that you want to in your life, then I think that it should be a part of it. So I'll say that first. But, when it comes down to making more money, you can either raise the income that you already have through the job that you already have, or the other way is to start something that's going to bring in additional income, right? So we do both. Which one do you want to talk about first?
So let me ask you actually then, on average, do more people tend to want to raise their current income that you work with, or do they want to get a side thing?
Like what? Want to start a side thing.
Okay.
They really do, because they're scared to death of asking for a raise. The easier one to do is ask for a raise. Like it's really difficult to start a side business, right?
Let's talk about the raise first then. Let's get into both, but the raise, that sounds great. It sounds like, all right, you just walk in and be like, hey, I'd like a raise. Yes, you can have a raise, but I'm assuming that's not how it really works.
Most of the time it does not happen that way.
Okay.
However, most of the time it is as simple as starting the process with one conversation. Because here's the reality. I mean, I think I've in my lifetime probably employed 200 something different people, been their boss in some fashion or whatever, and helped coach a whole bunch of other people that are in leadership positions. And none of those people, myself or anybody else, is going to be excited to give you a raise if you're not performing and kicking some serious tail at your job, right? Mm-hmm. So then it becomes 80-20 rule, which I don't know how familiar your audience is with that.
I'm pretty sure familiar? Pretty familiar with that.
So if you've heard the 80-20 rule, what are the things that you can do, the 20% of the stuff that you can do that's going to get you 80% of the results? Mm-hmm. Well, here it is being on the same page with your boss and the priorities. Because if your boss is feeling like, hey, you're completely knocking it out of the park, then guess what? You're completely knocking it out of the park. So how do you do that, right? The very, very easiest way that I've ever found to do that is simply over time, have a weekly or biweekly 15-minute conversation with your boss where you are establishing what's priority number 1, number 2, and number 3. And what are the things that I'm going to accomplish within priority 1, 2, and 3. And if I do that and then I overachieve on 1, 2, and 3, then all of a sudden your boss is like, wait, this is exactly what I wanted. Plus you're overachieving. Oh, weird. You're completely knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
Once you're in that type of position and you have a great relationship with your boss, which, by the way, those regular types of communications are going to give you an amazing relationship with your boss. Naturally, you're going to start talking about other things, especially when your boss has this trust in you that, we're exactly on the same page. It's like we don't even have to ask, that sort of thing. When that happens over time, then you're going to build that relationship. And then it becomes very, very easy to go to your boss and say, hey, look, I'm earning $75,000 right now. I want to be earning 94. What do I need to do to make that happen?
Hmm.
And when you do it that way, you're approaching it as a partnership, which then eliminates the whole possibility of them saying no. Because people have this fear in their head of, if I go ask for a raise, I don't want to do it because they might say no, and then I look like a jerk or somebody who wants more, or I feel guilty, and all these different emotions, right?
Mhm.
And if you can just completely avoid all that stuff, so that 80/20 piece is, how do you build the right relationship and have the right priorities with your boss, and then that puts you in a very, very easy position to be able to go to them and not ask for a raise, but instead ask, what do I need to do in order to make this happen? And a lot of times your boss doesn't know.
Hmm. Interesting. That makes sense. So if your boss doesn't know, what do you do? Like,
Well, that's where you end up helping them figure it out. That's where it becomes this true partnership. So it might be a period of like, 2 or 3 or 4 or 7 or 8 conversations where you guys learn together what needs to happen. Because if you're in a larger organization, you're going to have HR, you're going to have, experts in compensation, you're going to have the policies and blah, 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 all that stuff. So when you're talking about negotiation of any kind for anything, it is talking to the right person at the right place at the right time, right?
mhm.
And anything can be negotiated, or virtually anything can be negotiated when you've got those three lined up. So you already know the right person, or at least one of the right people. You already, on top of that, can create some sort of the right place and right time. Um, eh, but maybe not all the information is there, so maybe that doesn't perfectly line up with the right time. So then you have to go and you have to help with that process. So you might volunteer, hey, you know what? Can I schedule an appointment with HR so that we can sit down and learn what has to happen? Because chances are high your boss doesn't get this request all the time, because only 13% of Americans actually ask for a raise, and a lot less than that actually get it.
Mm.
So yeah, you have to help them through the process and be willing to help them through the process. So ultimately, even if you get a no, that doesn't mean no. It means not right now,
Mm.
because it might be, well, I need to clear this with my boss, or the VP of compensation is going to have to be in on this deal, and he's going to have to say yes, or she's going to have to say yes in order to make this thing happen. So then it becomes okay, well, what do we need to do in order to do that? Because you told me that if I do this thing, this thing, and this thing, then it makes it much more possible for you to be able to give this raise. And another phrasing that I use all the time is, what would it take for you to feel silly saying no to me?
Hmm. You actually, so you recommend people say that to you don't recommend people say that to the boss, right? That's just a
Yeah,
mindset.
no, I've said that
Oh, really?
personally.
I
Yeah.
like it.
uh,
I so I employ a couple people right now,
yep.
and as you're talking this whole time, I'm thinking, what could they say to me where I'd be happy to give them a raise? And the answer is, if they came to me and said, "Hey, what do I need to do to get a raise?" And I said, "All right, well, if you do this, this, this," and I see them, for instance, increase their productivity by 50%, let's say, that's a pretty big percent. I'd be extremely happy to give them a 25% increase in their salary.
Yeah,
That's just extra money for me in a sense. So
exactly.
it's an interesting way, like as an employer now, I see it so much different than I did as an employee. As an employee, I was scared to even ask, for a raise or any of that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, it can be kind of a scary conversation. It really can. And for most people at least. But you're right. Your boss, your employers, they're not thinking about it like that. They're not thinking about it at all. They're thinking about it like, um, if you're going to make me an extra $45,000 beyond what you're making me right now, you better believe I'm willing to give you a cut of that if we can continue to do that.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it from a return on investment perspective. Yeah, of course I'd be. Why wouldn't I give you a raise? I'll give you a $5,000 raise or whatever if you make me an extra 50 grand. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How about seven? Like, we can work this out. So
Absolutely. One question, and you kind of already touched on this, but
yeah,
my job out of college, I worked 2 years as like a consultant in a big company,
yep.
and it was every 6 months they reviewed you and got a raise. So using the strategy you're talking about, could you potentially get a raise in 3 months instead, or would it just be when that 6 months comes, they're more likely to give you a bigger raise? Like, how does it tend to work?
Depends on the organization. Depends on the poll of the people that you're talking to. The poll, when I say the poll, I'm talking about how much influence they have in the organization and how willing they are to go to bat for you. Because the reality is, the really simple reality is, any organization can change pay at any point in time, right? It's just how much red tape there is to get there. With a smaller organization where you're talking directly with the owner, there's a lot less red tape. It's like, yep, I'll write you the check tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, you and your employees, like, they bring an extra 50 grand in this month, you're going to figure it out, right?
Yeah, I'd give them an extra 10 grand in a second,
Exactly. But if it's a 40,000 or 100,000 person organization and they've got very specific policies in place and they've got whole departments of people that deal with that sort of thing, then there's a little bit more red tape there. And then it requires a little bit more finesse and typically a longer runway to be able to make that happen.
Okay. So it sounds like for the most part, as far as getting a raise, it's not as difficult as many people think. It's about having an open conversation weekly or bi-weekly and kind of building up to it. It's not going to necessarily happen storming into the office and saying, I'd like more money, and your boss is like, yeah, you can get more money.
I'll tell you how to get more money when you get your next job offer, because I'm letting you. Yeah, so it really is. It's about how do you put yourself in the right time and right place initially, and then that is through that 15-minute conversation, or can be as simple as that 15-minute conversation. And then, yeah, once you feel very good about being able to be in that place where you've got that good relationship, you have very clear evidence that your boss is on the same page with you, then yeah, go and ask. And the worst thing that happens is they say, well, here's what it would take, or I'm honestly not sure what it'd take, or I don't think that that's a possibility. And then you can turn around and be able to ask, well, under what circumstances would it be a possibility?
Gotcha. All right, so let's talk about, and that sounds like a pretty, I don't want to say easy, but straightforward way of going about it, and potentially easier than the side business. But the side business is something I think a lot of people are interested in.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. If you have someone come to you and say, hey, I hate my job, or whatever, not necessarily I hate my job, the job's not giving me enough income, I've capped out, like my boss will not give me a raise, how do I get side income? What's your next steps with this person?
Well, over the last 2 years, I built our business Happen Your Career on the side. So that's been, and you and I were talking a little bit about that, when we met, like 3 weeks ago or something.
Yeah.
Backstory is, Travis and I met at Podcast Movement, right? Mm-hmm. And we're chatting, and I'm drinking my Dos Equis, and we were chatting with, who else was there? Austin Netzley and a few other folks, and anyhow, I think I was telling you that I built this on the side, and only just recently put in my notice. But over the last 2 years, I've gotten lots of people that have found that out, and I was getting regular emails about, hey, how are you doing this type of thing? Like, where are you finding the time? How does this work? How did you decide on what type of business? All these types of questions. So we actually more recently we created this program called Side Biz MBA, where we help people do exactly that. But here's what we do in the program. I'll just tell you what we do. The very, very first thing is we help people generate ideas for what we call a strengths-based business. And there's a couple of reasons we do that. And we focus on strengths-based business, and we teach that, through that course and everything else that we teach too. But any business, is intense, right? Like, you're going to put a lot of work into it for the most part in order to make it successful. Even if later it creates some type of passive income or whatever else, there's still a lot of initial work that goes into it to get to that point. So when we talk about strengths-based businesses, we're talking about what are the things that naturally allow you to do what you're great at or have the potential to be great at. And then at the same time, what are those things that you really enjoy or have expertise at? So we help people generate, the initial process is we help people generate all of these different ideas, and then we help them eliminate all the ideas that really don't make sense for a business, either because they don't have a market, or too difficult to implement, or it's going to cost $400,000 to be able to get that type of business up and running. And then we help them create this idea, turn it into an actual business model, and then go through on the side. So we start with that strengths-based business, and then we go through an idea validation process. And that gets thrown around a lot. You've probably heard that term a lot, right?
Sure.
So the process that we help people go through is getting as close as possible to identifying the target market and then talking with and selling to that target market as soon as possible. So we spend a lot of upfront time with people, really trying to pick the right idea and sort of the whole Abraham Lincoln, I'm going to sharpen my axe before chopping down the tree type thing, right?
Yeah.
And then we help them go through this idea validation process where they are literally, in some cases, getting on the phone with people who are in their target market and really trying to understand, are they helping add value to their lives in a way that people are willing to pay for? So that's where it begins.
So, question for you.
Yeah.
Finding your strengths is not always an easy thing. Like, how do you,
No.
how do you help people find their strength? And I mean, I have ideas of what my strengths are, but when you said that, I'm like, what would I do?
We do it a lot of different ways because
Okay.
the reality is people don't arrive at their strengths all through one way. I mean, that's the reality. So we've got this process in a different program actually that we borrow from called Figure Out What Fits. And the entire first part of that program is really helping people do exactly what you asked, identify your strengths. How do you figure that out? So one exercise, I mean, this is a really simple exercise. Anybody can do it any place at any time. It doesn't require tons of technology or a specific test or whatever else. It is as simple as you pull out a piece of paper and I want you to list all of your past jobs, volunteer experiences, whatever else, businesses that you've run, whatever applies to you, right? And then I want you to list underneath those things, what are the things that you enjoyed the most about each one of those jobs? Even if you entirely hated the job, like there's just terrible job, there's still something that you either looked forward to or something in there that you enjoyed much more than the other stuff.
Yeah.
And, we do that, and then we have people go through that and start to get to the root cause. Under what circumstances did they enjoy that thing? And then we literally have them break it down through if you've ever heard of like Lean or Kaizen, or a lot of those things have a problem-solving methodology where they call 5 whys, right? So we kind of borrow from that, where it's like, okay, I really enjoyed communicating with other people. Well, why did I enjoy that? Well, because I like that type of interaction with other people who happen to be receptive to it. Well, why did I enjoy that? And going through and finding out, well, it's not just the communication that I enjoyed, it's that I actually really enjoy working with other people that have similar values, and I actually really enjoy being able to speak to them and help change their mind. And you sort of get to what the root cause of that is, in the root of your strength. And then we have people take all those different roots, because those become clues along the way to what you actually should be doing and what you should be incorporating into your either business or, if you're looking for a job.
The 5 whys methodology, is it just asking why constantly, or what exactly?
It really is. It's.
I was great at that at 5. That was my thing.
I know, that's the thing, but somewhere along the way, we're like, I don't know, because it is.
Yeah, just because, duh.
Yeah.
Come on.
So the really difficult thing about strengths that most of the people that we've worked with struggle with is they just sort of accept it at face value. But then we start asking other questions with them and saying, well, what type of people do you actually like doing that with? Well, I love golf. Well, why do you love golf? What is it about golf that you actually love? Well, I get to spend time in the open air, and I really like doing things that are semi-physical. I don't know how physical you consider golf, but whatever it is, breaking that down and asking why again and again and again until you can't go any further. And then that's where you start to get to the root. And those roots are what give you the real clues. Now, bypassing, a fun tool, we're trying to create, so we sell so many of these books, like on Amazon through affiliate links and stuff like that we're trying to see if we can get some partnership together with the folks over at Gallup and Strength Finders. And I don't know exactly where that's going to go, but that's another way that helps you kind of bypass some of that and start to put names and verbiage and words to some of your strengths, because people really struggle with that. And I have well over 100 emails of our customers or our listeners to Happen to Your Career podcast where they've purchased Strength Finders and they're like, oh my goodness, I read it, and it's like, that is exactly what I'm great at.
Mm.
So that's another shortcut way that can help you start understanding what some of your strengths are. Most people find it to be pretty accurate. I've found it to be pretty accurate with clients that I've worked with, but it doesn't give you the application.
So let me ask you, do you need to pay for the StrengthsFinder, or is there good free alternatives?
StrengthsFinder, they offer an assessment that's like $10,
Okay.
and that's what I would recommend. But you do need to pay for that. They don't have a really solid free model. And they started working on it well over 30 years ago. This
Oh,
thing's
wow.
been around for a long time, just not in this form. But yeah, it's probably one of the most accurate things that I've seen out there, which is why we keep using it and keep recommending it. But yeah.
So another question for you. You talked about once you find out what your strength is, you want to
Mm-hmm.
validate your business. So I'll tell you, for example, one of the things I do think I'm strong at, I haven't done the Strengths Finder, but is like learning and teaching. And I have another podcast where I talk about building online stores. So one of the
Okay.
things I really want to start doing is offering like courses and things of that nature, like teaching people, consulting, stuff like that about building online stores. And
Mm-hmm.
I do have a list of people that I know are interested. What kind of questions should I ask these people to better validate my business and figure out which way I should take it?
Okay. When you say you have people interested, these are people that are potential customers, or at
Online
least in your
store
target
owners,
market.
yeah, online
Okay.
store owners that in the target market. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a couple of different types of questions that I would suggest that you ask. One is, I guess even before getting to the questions, you don't want to go into those conversations pitching your business model. Like, you're not going to learn jack out of that. You really, truly won't. So instead, the way that I would go into it is get on the phone with these people or get on Skype with these people and be able to say, look, I want to understand what your problems and what your challenges are.
Mm,
And
like that.
we're looking to create a business in this, but really, I'd love to just spend 15 minutes with you and ask for 15 minutes, because most people can commit 15 minutes. Now, if they decide they want to stay on the phone or Skype longer with you for an hour or 2 hours, which sometimes happens, because once you get them going talking about it, a lot of times they don't want to stop, then that's their prerogative. You're still being respectful of their time. But initially, just set it up so that you say, hey, I want to understand what your problems and your challenges are. So starting out, when you get on the phone, after building just a little bit of rapport to be able to make it more comfortable, then you can simply say, look, tell me what your biggest problem in your business is right now. Well, why is that a problem? Help me understand what's causing such a problem. What have you tried in the past as a solution for that problem? And that's important too, because when you go to assuming you come up with a solution that fits what these people need, understanding what they've tried in the past allows you to have a different conversation. Even if you're selling it online on a sales page, it allows you to get the type of verbiage that's different if you understand, hey, look, I've already tried this. So like a lot of our customers, for what we do, they've been searching job postings. Even if they want to own a business, it's funny, they still search job postings and stuff. So that's one of the things that's in our sales page. And when I talk to people, you've probably been searching for job postings and not finding what it is that fits you, right?
I like it.
And that's something that I say. So you can do the exact same thing. What have they tried? What
Yeah.
have you tried in the past that hasn't worked for you? Why hasn't it worked for you?
Huh.
And start to dig and dig and dig. And again, you see that question of why coming up here again and again. One, because you're truly trying to understand, and you have to go into this with that type of inquisitiveness. Otherwise, it's simply not going to work well. And then two, because it allows you to dig beyond that layer. You were going to ask something, though.
I was going to say something actually. Is I really like what you said there about, it helps you to write better copy for your landing page. If you can really understand them, then it's like, this is you, and they'd be like, oh my God, this is me. I have been searching for, jobs, which isn't something I'd initially think. If you want to start a side business, I wouldn't think you've probably been looking at the job listing, but once you interview them and you find out that they have, you can write a better landing page, which will really communicate with them. This is the course or site or whatever for me.
Yeah. And I think I first heard of, I want to say it was Ramit Sethi a couple of years ago or something, that I first heard that concept from before I started learning about it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But oh man, that's been ridiculously powerful, because then it starts to give you some of those emotional triggers, like I think you're referencing. So yeah. So once you've got some of those pieces and start to understand what the business challenges are, and dig and dig and dig and dig and help them kind of. A lot of times they don't know what the solution is, right? They don't. Otherwise, they would have it already. They would do it already.
One question before we go any farther. Do you
Yep.
offer them any kind of like, hey, if you come on the phone with me for 15 minutes, I'll give you a gift card to Starbucks, or you just ask like,
No.
okay,
No. I find that I don't need to.
cool.
I find that well, no, I shouldn't say that. I haven't done that much. So I was going to say the couple of times I've done it, I felt like it sort of changes the dynamic a little bit, but I've only done it twice. Otherwise, I'm doing it for free every time. And I've done lots of times for free. So you might, as a thank you afterwards, drop them a thank you note and throw a $5 Starbucks gift card in there or something like that, and then they're going to be a fan of you forever. But
And we didn't talk about finding these people. For me, it's easy because I already have an email list, all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. But let's say I was a new person, I have this new business idea. How do I find potential clients or potential people that would be a good fit?
that's where it becomes really critical that you start to understand what your target market is.
Gotcha.
Because if you understand what your target market is, and when I say target market, I'm talking about, who are these people? How old are they? Are they male? Are they female? Are they, where do they live? Do they live in the U.S.? Do they live in India? Do they live in where do these people actually live? What do these people do? Like, what do they do for work? What are their interests? Where do they hang out online? And then you can start to, depending on the type of people that you're targeting, then you can start to figure out, where do I connect? And in SideBiz MBA, that program that I was talking about for us, we'll guide people to look at the easiest places first. Do you have anybody in your group of friends or your family that happens to perfectly match this target market? So for one of our courses, we target 30 to 35-year-old females, women that are professionals that really are not that interested in staying in their job forever. They're really overwhelmed. They're pretty highly stressed. They like coffee and craft beer. They most of them don't have children, but they are in a relationship, and on and on. Once we know a bit about these people, we understand where we can actually find them. Well, it turns out, here's a great example of this. I've got a friend who has a podcast. His name's Paul Coliani. Have you met Paul?
I don't think I have, no.
Oh, really good guy. But he runs a podcast called The Overwhelmed Brain. Well, as it turns out, some of his biggest demographics are exactly that. So we've done a couple of shows where we've invited people to email me, and that's one way we were able to get and start talking to people immediately. Started getting these emails, and it's like, hey, can I get on the phone with you? Or hey, here's a little bit about what we're doing. I'd be interested in knowing more about this. So once you have identified that target market really down to the letter, then you know where to start talking to these people. And what you might find, here's the challenge, here's the hard part for people. Even if they do a great job of identifying the target market in this upfront work, and you get on the phone with them, some people get attached to their idea, so they don't want to hear that the target market doesn't actually want it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard, because you do get emotionally attached to your idea. You think about it and you're like, oh, this would be so great. And I know that I would love this, so why wouldn't everybody else?
Yeah.
And you might find that that's not actually the case, or there's a different problem.
That's really interesting. So let's say we have an idea, we've validated it, and everything's kind of working out. What's the next step forward? Obviously building a website, but how do you get those initial clients in this case?
Here's the cool thing, the really cool thing, I think anyways. If you have already done that process and you have been able to connect with people, then you already have some relationships built with people that exactly want your thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just go back to them and say, look, I'm actually making this. Would you like to purchase it?
And how do you test price points, and how do you figure that out? Because that's a tough part.
Pricing, I think, it is a tough part. It's tough for everybody because there's so many mental junk wrapped up around pricing. Truly. I mean, for myself included, like I have to get help on that too, because I can't see my own blind spots. But when I'm working with people, it's usually, hey, look, as quickly as possible, I want to get you to a paid version of what it is that you're doing. So I'll usually guide the pricing around two things. One, how quickly can we get to that so that you can just experiment? Like if I'm offering a service and it's not a product that takes tons of, it's not a product that's going to take me 3 months to make or something like that. If I'm just offering a service and we can start tomorrow with that, then I might guide somebody to just move past the mental junk and start accepting money for that, because that's a challenge for people if they've never done that before too.
Okay.
So it might be as simple as saying, look, you're going to charge $75 an hour and you're going to go with that because you're really uncomfortable charging more. And it's more important for you to get the confidence and the win around being able to just take any kind of money for this than it is to really decide a certain price point. So sometimes we're in that case, or like if it's a product, like some of the programs we built, it literally takes us 3 months to make these things. Mm-hmm. So we'll pre-sell these, but we'll figure out in advance what's worth it to actually make it. Because if I only make $300 off this program that's going to take me 3 months to make, I mean, maybe I have the passive income later, but one, have I really validated that it's truly something that people want? And then two, is it worth it for $300 to be able to make this thing? So we'll allow what the time frame going into it is to guide that a little bit. And then also, more importantly than all that, what the value they're actually going to get out of it. So if I make a product that is going to help somebody's business like yours, and it's going to make you $50,000, it's probably acceptable that I charge $10,000 for that product, right?
Yeah.
If you put, you give me 10 grand and then out the other end, you get 50,000 for it, that's a good trade-off.
Yeah.
Just like, the ROI of what we were talking about before for employees. And, that value is sometimes not always that concrete, but if it is, we're gonna definitely lean towards that.
This is a lot of great stuff. So let's say that this whole time this has been something on the side and someone has a career. One thing you do really well is you help people transition from having a career to being location independent, their own boss kind of thing. So can you talk about that? Like, how do you help people go from having this thing on the side to it being their full-time gig?
And to be really, really clear, we help people. We've helped people through that process. Our specialty is not necessarily like that's what we do. We help you become location independent. Sure. But I guess I've done that for myself. I guess twice now.
You're an expert at this point.
Yeah, I guess so. And then. Yeah, if you've done it, apparently that now makes you, I don't know, however that works. But then the other thing that I would say about it really is it's much more about the head games that come along with it. Because if you're starting something on the side and you're taking it to a full-time gig, there's just tons of challenges that are in there that aren't really about so much the information or the technical aspect of here's how I actually make that happen. Like what we were talking about before for the pricing and the here's how I validate and here's how I do this. It's much more about, oh my goodness, I don't think that I'm capable of doing this, or I don't feel like I have the time to do this, or who in the right mind is going to pay me when, yes, I have more experience than them, but am I really an expert type thing? Yeah. And those are the types of things that I find go through people's heads and really more often than not are the showstoppers. So we spend a lot of time trying to weed through all that stuff up front and help people eliminate and put systems in place that can help you avoid that or sidestep that.
Okay. So
here's what I mean by that. A great example from my own business, and I've done HR on the side or HR on whichever one you want to look at as the side. My day job, I guess. I've done HR for like 8 years.
Okay.
And HR leadership, coaching leaders, all kinds of stuff like that. Compensation, that's how I know stuff about that. But my biggest challenge when I had a full-time job is where was the time going to come from? Mm-hmm. Like that was a big deal to me and my wife, because we were trying to figure out, okay, look, we've got little kids, and how are we going to manage this where like, hey, I can still be a good dad, yeah, or I can do the stuff that I want, or still go hang out with friends, or us not sacrificing completely the rest of our lives. How do we do that? So we'll teach people to, and this is exactly what I did, we teach people to figure out where in your current week, even looking at your current week, what are those things that you want in your life continuously? And what are those things that are just happening? So yeah, we found that we were spending like 3 hours a week watching The Voice, and as awesome as The Voice is, it wasn't really contributing that much that, 10 years from now, we were going to be really excited about.
Yeah.
So we flat out eliminated that and instead replaced that same time with working on the business, which we do believe it has been able to pay off for the type of stuff that we want and we want to continue to have in our life, or for other things. I mean, we started traveling. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be that side business, but the real intention there is how do you build routines? How do you build that schedule that is going to allow you to get closer and closer and closer to what you want? So we have people create like literally a weekly schedule where they can, on this day, do this thing. They've got 2 hours here. How do they plan on this? And then use that 80-20 rule to be able to figure out what's the most important thing that should go during that time. Is it The Voice, or is it making these sales calls to these people to find out if they're going to buy my product and bring in $2,000 or $3,000?
Wow. Okay. So there's been a lot of information in this episode, and I want to wrap up right now. And I have one question I always ask people at the end, and that is basically, if you could say one thing to everyone in their 20s or something you wish you would have known earlier on, what piece of advice or what thing would you tell the audience listening to this?
That's a great question. And I'm not just saying that to buy myself time, although I may need more time. But I really, really strongly believe that if you start now getting clear at whatever age you are, whether you're 21 or 29 or
30s,
any age,
even.
wherever you are, I would push you really, really hard to figure out what it is that you want, not just in your career, but your entire life. And not to accept social norms and social pressures, and not to accept those limitations either. And what I mean by that is really, really figuring out for you, not somebody else's version of what they think that you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes you happy. And more importantly, the way that you want to spend your time. What are those ways? Figure out what are those ways that are intensely valuable to you that give you joy, or you find yourself really absolutely loving to do when you spend time doing that. Who are those people that you enjoy spending the time with, or who are those types of people in some cases? And then once you've identified all of that, then it becomes so much easier to say, look, this eliminates 98% of the stuff out there that I thought would probably be good for me. And instead I can just focus on the 2% or less that really actually matters and is going to make me happy. And then you start to move from this, I don't know what to do, I'm overwhelmed, into this, here's what I should be doing because I understand myself enough to know what it is that I want. So I'm 33 now. That's the thing I wish I would have done a lot earlier in my life. I started in my 20s, but I wish I would have done it at like 21 or 18, or I don't know, it's hard to do it at 18. So 21. So that's what I would push people to do. And in fact, well, if you want, we have a free 8-day course that actually helps people with something very, very similar to that. We could set up a custom page for all of you that are listening. Would that be beneficial?
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes and everything.
Okay. So what do you want me to set that up at? 20s? happentoyourcareer.com/20s?
Sounds good. The number 20S?
20S.
Perfect.
We'll set it up.
And obviously that's one place, but where else can people find out more about you?
Yeah. You can find us certainly at happentoyourcareer.com. You can find our podcast by searching on iTunes, searching on Stitcher, search HTYC or Happen to Your Career, and it'll pop right up. And you can also find you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or any place that friends are made. I'm there. Connect up with me at any of those places, or you can just email me, scott@happentoyourcareer.com. And yeah, any of those places work.
Awesome. Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate you asking.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, make sure you hit the big red subscribe button down below. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Twitter, and I release a new video every Monday, and by hitting that subscribe button, you'll get those new videos every Monday. And this is really a podcast. It's also a website. You can check out the website. It's howtodoyour20s.com. I'll put a link right over here as well. And what it's all about is trying to improve your life. And we specifically focus on things that people in their 20s are interested in. So make sure you like the video if you liked it. Subscribe. Like us on Facebook and Twitter, whatever. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again on another video.